Hi, percussionists. I'm going to walk you through here some of the practicing features that you have available to you with Smartmusic that are meant to help you become a stronger percussionist, and to help you practice more efficiently. So this is a typical exercise that you may see. I'm sure it's on the easier side for some of you, um, but this is what it looks like. First of all, you'll notice up here at the top, next to the word Smartmusic, you have um, you have five different menus, right? So you've got tracks, my takes, assessment, loop, and display. We're going to start with my takes, and the reason I'm going to switch from tracks to my takes right now, I'm sorry, I didn't mean my takes. I wanted to go to assessment. So when you open up something to practice as a percussionist, whether or not you're practicing on snare drum or you're practicing on a practice pad, you need to go to assessment first. And the first thing that you need to do is check the box next to percussion or clap mode. You need to do this for every new exercise that you open. So if you were to practice this one and turn it in and then go on and start practicing another exercise, your first thing to do is to go to assessment and turn on percussion clap mode. If you don't do this, the software will not hear you correctly, and it will cause mistakes to happen where they shouldn't be. So make sure that you do that. All right, so now I'm going to go back to tracks. That's the tab that first comes up when you open up an assignment. And you'll notice under tracks we have accompaniment, my part, and metronome. So accompaniment, in this exercise, you'll notice there's a bass drum part that is grayed out on the bottom. If you leave this speaker turned on, you're going to hear the bass drum part. And that's why it's under accompaniment. Because the main part is what you're playing, which is the snare or practice pad. The accompaniment is the bass drum. If I were to assign you a piece of music for that we're working on in full band, you'd hear the entire band playing their parts with you, which is kind of nice when you're working on a piece of music. You'd hear the entire band playing, and you could toggle that on and off by hitting that speaker button. You can also adjust the volume level of the accompaniment part. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that bass drum down a little bit, but I'm going to leave it on, which is why it's still orange. What's very nice is you can hear your part and hear what your snare part is supposed to sound like. So I'm going to leave that volume up, and I'm going to leave it orange, and we're going to go ahead and hit play and listen to that. So there you can hear what it's supposed to sound like. You're also hearing the clicking of the metronome happen in the background. So the metronome is definitely something that you want to use and leave on, because that's always going to keep steady time for you. You can have it subdivide the beat or keep track of eighth notes instead of just quarter notes by simply doing this, checking the subdivisions box, and you'll hear how that changes the sound of the metronome. And by checking that box again, it will turn the eighth note click off and go back to just quarter notes. In most cases, that's what you're going to want to do, is just leave it on so that it's clicking the quarter note beat. But as you play some faster exercises, you might find it helpful to subdivide the metronome beat. You can change your speed or your tempo of what you're practicing over here. This number here means there are 120 beats happening in a minute. And if you lower that by clicking this minus button, the music will get slower, or it'll get faster if you do the plus. So generally when we're practicing, we want to try it at whatever tempo we're giving it to first. If that doesn't go well, we need to find a slow tempo that we can play it right at, and then gradually speed it up. So let's listen to what happens when I make this 60 beats per minute instead of the 120 that we were set at. Okay, so obviously it went to a slower tempo, which might be better for you to start learning something at, and then you gradually speed it up to the faster tempo as you learn it. My takes is where it keeps track of your different recordings. So when you're ready to start practicing to turn something in, you can hit press record right over here, and it'll start recording every time you practice it. And when you press down on this arrow, you'll be able to hear and see all the different takes that you recorded. Assessment we already talked about. Remember, percussion clap mode needs to be turned on. Loop is a nice feature if there's a part of the music that you're having a hard time with specifically. So let's say that you could play this entire exercise except for the second and third measure. Those are the two that you have a lot of trouble on. So you just want to practice those over and over again. You go to loop, hit set, and you can stretch your handlebars to whichever measures you need. And now what Smartmusic will do is just have you practice over and over again those two measures instead of doing the whole thing. And when you think you have it done good and you're ready to do the whole thing again, you hit clear, and that clears those two measures out. Display. So display has the ability to turn on or off the highlighted measure. So if you watch the blue measure right now, as I click the square next to highlight measure, it takes the highlight away. Personally, I like the highlight on. If you get lost at all, it'll bring your eyes right back to where you need to be. And finally, there's three different ways that you can have this cursor right here follow the notes and where you're supposed to be in the measure. You can do it on beat cursor, which is what it's been on. That's its default. There's another way, which is flow, another way, which is note, or you can turn the cursor off. So I would not play with the cursor off. That defeats the purpose of having the cursor on the screen, which helps show you where you're supposed to be. But you can try these other ways. Some students prefer a different way. I personally like flow cursor. I think it flows as it says through the music a little bit nicer. That's the one I prefer. But it's different for everybody. So you can try each cursor that you might like. So that's it for this part of my tutorial. I'm going to come back with a third video where I'm actually practicing with it to show you how to practice with it and how to turn an assignment.